What if an ordinary night turned into a confrontation with one's own mortality? Marcus Williams, a dedicated teacher and tireless activist, never imagined that his fight for social justice would lead to a near-death experience that would change his life forever. Shot by police officers during an unfair stop, Marcus found himself on a threshold between life and death, where he found his deceased grandmother in a dimension that defied understanding. But what really happened in this meeting? Can Marcus accept what he saw and heard, or is it all just a delusion of his traumatized mind? As Marcus struggles to reconcile his experience with the harsh reality that awaits him, he questions whether what he experienced was a real message or just an illusion created by his mind. How will this spiritual journey affect your life, your family, and your fight for justice? And will he have the courage to fulfill the mission his grandmother revealed to him? These are the questions that guide us through an intense and deeply emotional story. I'm Anthony Bennett, and welcome to my Near-Death Experience channel. Let's hear this story together. Marcus Williams, 35, was a man who stood out in the Detroit, Michigan community. A history teacher at a public school, he dedicated his life to teaching about African American culture and the fight for social justice. Marcus was passionate about his work and deeply believed that knowledge was a powerful tool for social transformation. In addition to being an educator, he was a committed activist, actively participating in protests and community meetings, always fighting for the rights of his community. Married to Vanessa, a dedicated nurse, Marcus had 2 young children, Aaliyah and Jordan. He was a loving and present father who made a point of transmitting to his children the values of justice, equality, and respect for others. The relationship between Marcus and Vanessa was based on love and partnership, and together, they strived to create a home filled with love and security. Vanessa, despite supporting Marcus' work, often worried about the risks he took in confronting injustice. Marcus's life was deeply influenced by his grandmother, Evelyn, who raised him with strong values of resilience and courage. Evelyn was a wise and spiritual woman who always encouraged him to never let difficulties get him down. Marcus, remember where you came from and who you are. You are strong, and nothing can bring you down, she used to say. These words echoed in his mind, guiding his actions and decisions, especially when he faced difficult situations. In the community, Marcus was seen as a natural leader, someone who always knew what to say and how to act in times of crisis. His calmness and his ability to resolve conflicts peacefully were admired by everyone. He was often called upon to mediate discussions and find fair solutions to problems that arose. However, this prominent position also made him a target in a system that often saw the fight for equality as a threat to the established order. Despite the challenges and dangers he faced daily, Marcus maintained an optimistic spirit and an unshakable faith in the possibility of change. He believed that, with education and unity, it was possible to build a more just and egalitarian society. This optimism was the driving force in his life, what pushed him to move forward, even when the path seemed difficult. For him, his mission in life was clear: to fight for a better world for his children and future generations. However, Marcus knew that his job was not easy and that he faced real risks. Still, he was not intimidated, convinced that he was on the right path. He believed that true change required sacrifices, and he was willing to do his part, even if it meant facing dangerous situations. But he couldn't predict what was coming, and how a single night would change his life forever. On that cold autumn night, Marcus was returning home after a long community meeting. The discussion had been about how to protect young black men from police violence, a topic that had always weighed heavily on his heart. He drove through the dark, quiet streets of Detroit, thinking about how he would share the details of meeting Vanessa and the joy of being with his children. But as he made a turn onto a less busy street, he noticed something that made him stay alert. A police car was following him closely. Initially, Marcus tried to remain calm as he knew he was doing nothing wrong. However, the lingering presence of the vehicle behind him caused an uneasy feeling to begin to grow in his chest. When the red and blue lights began to flash, accompanied by the sound of the siren, Marcus felt his heart quicken. He pulled the car over to the curb, trying to stay calm as his thoughts raced. He knew the risks he faced as a black man in such a situation, and he knew that any wrong move could have serious consequences. With his hands firmly on the steering wheel, he waited as the officers approached his car. Two white officers approached him with stern expressions, and one of them ordered him out of the car. Marcus obeyed without hesitation, aware that the best way to survive the situation was to be cooperative. As one of the officers began to search the car, the other pushed Marcus against the hood, forcing him to lie still. "Stay still and don't move," the officer ordered, his voice filled with cold authority. Marcus tried to explain that he was a teacher and that he was returning home after a meeting, but his words were ignored. Fear began to mix with indignation, but he knew he couldn't allow himself to react impulsively. Suddenly, without any warning, the police officer who was searching the car drew his gun. The world seemed to stop for a moment, and before Marcus could process what was happening, a gunshot rang out in the night. The bullet hit his body hard, and he fell to the ground, feeling intense pain shoot through him. The cold asphalt against his face and the blood rapidly spreading around him were the last physical sensations he registered before his vision began to go black. As his consciousness began to fade, Marcus felt a strange calm come over him. His thoughts turned to Vanessa, to Aaliyah and Jordan, and to everything he hadn't done yet. But before he could delve into those thoughts, something changed around him. The pain disappeared, and he began to feel an unusual lightness, as if he were pulling away from his body and being pulled to another place. When Marcus opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the dark, cold street where he had been shot. He found himself in a place that defied description. Everything around him was a silent void, filled with a soft light that seemed to emanate from all sides. There was no sound, there was no pain, just a feeling of deep peace that he had never experienced before. He tried to move, but realized he no longer had a physical body, just a floating consciousness. As he tried to understand where he was, Marcus noticed a familiar figure emerging from the light. It was his grandmother, Evelyn, who had passed away many years ago. She approached him with a warm and welcoming smile, just as he remembered. "Marcus, my dear," she said softly, reaching out her hand to him. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and confusion. He wanted to speak, but he couldn't find the words. He was happy to see her, but at the same time, none of it made sense to him. "Evelyn, where are we? What's going on?" he finally managed to ask, his voice shaking with emotion. Evelyn held his hand firmly, her touch bringing a sense of comfort and security. "You're between two worlds, Marcus," she explained. "This is not your time. There are things you still need to do, and your mission on Earth is not over." Marcus felt a wave of contradictory emotions. He didn't want to go back, but he also knew that his grandmother was right. He looked around, trying to understand what was happening, but everything seemed unreal. I was shot. I thought I was dead," he said, still trying to process the situation. Evelyn shook her head, her eyes full of wisdom and compassion. "You're hurt, but you're not dead. There's still so much you need to do, for your family, for your community. You can't give up now," she said, her voice firm but full of love. Despite his grandmother's comforting words, Marcus felt internal resistance. He wanted to stay in that place where there was no pain, where he was with someone he loved and who understood him completely. But Evelyn continued to speak, her words sinking deep into his heart. "Marcus, you have a mission. Your children need you. Your community needs you. But to do that, you need to believe in yourself and the importance of what you still have to do." Marcus's internal struggle was intense. He wanted to believe it, he wanted to accept what his grandmother was saying, but something inside him still resisted. I don't know if I can, Evelyn. Everything seems so hard. The world out there is so unfair," he confessed, his voice full of doubt. Evelyn smiled tenderly and shook his hand. The strength you need is within you, Marcus. It always has been. You are stronger than you think. Now, it's time to go back and fulfill your mission. I understand the frustration and apologize for the error. We will adjust from topic 4 to ensure that the NDE experience fills topics 3, 4, and 5 with all the necessary detail. Marcus felt like he was being sucked back into the physical world, but he didn't want to accept what was happening. When he opened his eyes, he was back in empty darkness, but this time the pain from his wound was not there. Instead, he felt a strange pressure, as if he was being watched. Why am I here? Why can't I just be at peace? He shouted into the void. His voice echoed, but there was no immediate response. Evelyn appeared once again, her expression serene, but with a look of urgency that Marcus hadn't seen before. You still don't understand, Marcus. You have to go back. Your mission on Earth is not complete, she said, her voice firm but with a pleading tone. Marcus shook his head, frustrated. Mission? What mission is this that I didn't ask for? I'm tired, Evelyn. I'm tired of fighting, of seeing so much injustice, of feeling powerless. Marcus's grandmother approached, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. I know you're tired, my dear, but giving up now is not an option. Think of Vanessa, Aaliyah, and Jordan. They need you. Your community needs you. You are stronger than you know, but you have to believe in it, she insisted, her piercing gaze fixed on his eyes. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to force away the tears that threatened to fall. What if I don't succeed? What if I fail? He asked, his voice low and full of doubt. Evelyn smiled softly. It's not about not failing, Marcus. It's about keeping trying, even when things seem impossible. True strength is in continuing, despite the fear, despite the difficulties. You were chosen for this mission for a reason, and your voice is important. Don't underestimate the impact you have on people's lives, she said, her tone full of conviction. Marcus looked at her, still struggling to accept what he was hearing. But what if nothing changes? What if this is all for nothing? I don't want to go back to a world where things never get better, Marcus argued, his frustration growing. Evelyn, I feel like I'm fighting a losing battle. What's the point in continuing? His voice shook, showing the depth of his hopelessness. Evelyn remained calm, but her expression showed a deep understanding of what he was going through. Marcus, the world only changes when people like you refuse to give up. Change is slow, and sometimes you won't see the fruits of your labor in your lifetime. But every step you take, every young person you inspire, every injustice you fight is part of something bigger. You are an essential piece of this puzzle. You may not see the whole picture, but without you, it will never be complete, she explained, her voice full of wisdom. Those words touched something inside Marcus, but he was still full of questions and doubts. Evelyn, why me? Why do I have to carry this weight? It's not fair, he said, his voice thick with frustration and sadness. Why do we always have to be the ones who fight, the ones who suffer? I just want peace. I want to be with my family, without fear, without this constant fight for survival. He was on the verge of tears, emotional pain overflowing. Evelyn sighed, her gaze softening even more. Marcus, no one chooses the burdens they carry, but you have the strength to bear them. Life isn't fair, I know, but that's precisely why you must keep fighting. Not for what is, but for what can be. The fight for justice is never easy, but it is necessary. And you, my dear, have been called to lead this fight, to be the voice of those who have no voice, she said, with a conviction that echoed in Marcus's heart. He shook his head, still reluctant. I don't know if I can, Evelyn. What if I fail? What if I can't make a difference? The vulnerability in her voice was evident. He wanted to believe what his grandmother was saying, but the fear of failure paralyzed him. Evelyn, realizing his internal struggle, moved closer, holding his hands tightly. You are not alone in this fight, Marcus. You never have been. You have family, friends, a community that believes in you. And you have me, always. Evelyn's words began to penetrate the barriers Marcus had erected. He was still scared, but a part of him was starting to feel stronger, more determined. Evelyn, what if I'm not ready? What if I can't go back? I'm so lost. He admitted, his voice filled with uncertainty. Evelyn smiled again, but this time there was a firmness in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. Believe in yourself, Marcus. Everything you need is within you. Remember who you are, where you came from. Marcus felt an internal shift, a strength he didn't know he had beginning to emerge. He was still scared, still confused, but he began to realize that maybe his grandmother was right. Maybe he was stronger than he imagined. I'll try, Evelyn. I'll come back. But do you promise you'll be with me? That you'll guide me, he asked, his voice firmer but still carrying an honest vulnerability. Evelyn nodded, her smile full of love and pride. Always, my dear. I will be with you every step of the way. Now, it is time for you to return and fulfill your destiny. Do not be afraid. You are stronger than any challenge you may face. Her words echoed in Marcus' heart, filling him with new determination. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and when he opened them again, he was ready to face whatever came. Suddenly, Marcus felt a powerful force pulling him back. The feeling of weightlessness disappeared, replaced by an intense pressure in his chest. He tried to resist, but the force was relentless. I'm going to do this, Evelyn. I'm going to fight, he thought, as his consciousness began to return to his physical body. The light around him began to dim, and he felt darkness approaching. The last thing he saw before he was pulled back was his grandmother's smile, a smile he would forever keep in his heart. When he opened his eyes, Marcus was back to reality. He found himself lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines that monitored his vital signs. The pain returned with a vengeance, but now it was bearable. Vanessa was at his side, holding his hand, tears streaming down his face. You're back, Marcus. Thank God you're back, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was dry and sore. He blinked a few times, trying to focus on Vanessa's face, trying to understand what had happened. The memories of the experience he had with Evelyn were still vivid in his mind, but now, looking around, everything seemed so far away, so unreal. He wanted to believe in what he had experienced, but at the same time, he was haunted by doubt. Was it real? Or just a dream, he wondered, his mind spinning with possibilities. In the days that followed, as he recovered in the hospital, Marcus was torn between gratitude for being alive and confusion about what had really happened. He tried to talk about the experience with Vanessa, but the words seemed to escape his mouth. How could he explain something he himself could barely understand? Maybe it was just illusion, he thought, trying to rationalize the experience. But the image of Evelyn, so real, so present, continued to haunt him. As his recovery progressed, Marcus began to notice small changes in himself. The strength and determination he felt during his experience with Evelyn began to manifest itself in his daily life. He was still afraid, still confused, but something inside him had changed. He began to see the world in a different way, more focused, more resolute. But the doubt still persisted. Was it all real, or just a creation of his desperate mind? After being released from the hospital, Marcus returned home with Vanessa and their children, but something inside him was still conflicted. He couldn't forget what he had experienced during his near-death experience. Evelyn's words echoed in his mind, but he couldn't shake the feeling of that it could all have been just an illusion. How can I be sure that was real? He asked himself over and over, his mind constantly returning to that light, that conversation. Vanessa noticed Marcus's uneasiness, but he was hesitant to share his deepest thoughts with her. He was afraid of looking crazy, that she wouldn't understand what he was going through. Should I talk about this? He pondered as he tried to adjust to his normal routine. He felt that something had changed within himself, but at the same time, doubt and disbelief prevented him from fully accepting what he had experienced. The days passed, and Marcus tried to focus on his recovery and his family, but the experience haunted him. He would wake up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, Evelyn's words still fresh in his mind. "You have a mission. Don't give up now." These words echoed constantly, reminding him that perhaps there was something more, something he had not yet fully understood. But the more he tried to move away from those memories, the more they pulled him back. Marcus decided to look for answers. He began researching near-death experiences, reading accounts from other people who had been through similar situations. What he discovered was disconcerting. Many people described encounters with deceased loved ones, bright lights, and feelings of deep peace, exactly what he had experienced. Maybe it wasn't just my imagination, he thought, but the doubt persisted. He needed proof, something that confirmed that what he experienced was real. One afternoon, while reviewing the history books he always loved, Marcus found an old note between the pages of one of them. It was a note written by Evelyn when he was still a teenager, with a message he had forgotten. "Remember, Marcus, true strength is in continuing, even when it seems impossible. You are destined for great things." When he read those words, something inside him broke. He knew Evelyn was trying to tell him something he hadn't realized until that moment. Proof that the experience was real came not from a grand revelation, but from something simple and profound, the certainty in Marcus's heart that he was not alone, and that his mission on Earth was still ongoing. He finally accepted what he had experienced, not as a delusion, but as a calling to continue his fight, to be the force his grandmother always believed he could be. And with that acceptance came a new determination, a new clarity of purpose that he knew he needed to follow. With his new understanding, Marcus began to slowly reintegrate into his everyday life, but with a different perspective. He returned to work, resuming his classes and community activities, but now with a renewed conviction. Every word he taught, every conversation he had, was imbued with a greater purpose. He was more present, more aware of the importance of his voice and his action. The fight for justice has never seemed so clear to him as it does now. Vanessa noticed the change in Marcus, and although he had yet to speak openly about his experience, she could see that something profound had happened. "You look different," she commented one night, as they sat together on the couch, watching the children play. "It's like you found new strength." Marcus smiled at her but didn't respond immediately. He knew she was right, but he was still processing everything that had happened. Marcus also began sharing his new perspectives with his fellow activists. He encouraged them not to give up, to keep fighting, even when things seemed difficult. "I know the road is tough, but we need to keep going. Every little victory, every step forward, makes a difference," he would say in meetings, his voice filled with a conviction that inspired others. He not only talked the talk, but he also acted, taking the initiative on projects he had previously hesitated to lead. However, despite his new vigor, Marcus still had moments of doubt. There were days when he wondered if he was really on the right path, if he was doing enough. But, at these times, he remembered Evelyn's words and the note he had found. "True strength is in continuing, even when it seems impossible," he repeated to himself, using these words as a mantra to stay focused and determined. Over time, Marcus began to realize the impact of his actions. He saw changes in his students, in the way they engaged with the material, and the way they felt empowered to question and challenge the injustices they saw around them. He also saw changes in his community, small victories that, together, began to form a larger movement. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced his belief that he was on the right path. Returning to fighting was not easy, but Marcus felt that now, more than ever, he was fulfilling the purpose his grandmother had shown him. He was no longer fighting just for himself, but for all those who depended on him, for his family, for his students, for his community. And with this new clarity, he felt like he was finally living up to what he always believed his mission to be. As the months passed, Marcus began to fully accept what he had experienced during his near-death experience. He stopped questioning the reality of the experience and began to see it as a call to action. Evelyn's message became a guide in his life, and he began to trust his intuition and inner strength more. He knew there was something bigger at stake, and that he was part of a fight much bigger than himself. This acceptance did not come without a struggle. Marcus still had moments when he questioned what he had experienced, moments when doubt tried to infiltrate his mind. But he had learned to recognize these moments and face them with the strength he had discovered within himself. It's not about not being afraid, it's about acting despite it, he told himself, using this new philosophy to stay firm in his goals. Marcus also began to share his experience with Vanessa more openly. He told her about meeting Evelyn, about the words his grandmother had said, and about the internal struggle he had gone through. Vanessa listened intently, holding his hand, and when he finished, she hugged him tightly. "I always knew you were destined for something great, Marcus. I believe in you, and I'm here for you, whatever comes," she said, her voice full of love and support. This conversation was a turning point for Marcus. Knowing that Vanessa believed in him and supported him unconditionally gave him even more strength to continue. He began to see his mission not as a burden, but as a privilege, the opportunity to make a difference, to be a light in times of darkness. He embraced this responsibility with a new perspective, seeing each challenge as a chance to grow and to help others grow as well. Gradually, Marcus realized that the near-death experience had profoundly changed the way he saw the world. He was more present, more aware of the little things, more grateful for opportunities to make a difference. He also began to realize that the fight for justice was ongoing, and that each day was a new chance to move forward, even if just a little. "One step at a time," he said, remembering Evelyn's words. Finally, Marcus began to understand that the true mission Evelyn had mentioned was not just about him, but about everyone around him. It was about inspiring others, about being a force for positive change in your community. He realized that his grandmother was not only giving him a mission, but also showing him the way to find his own strength and purpose. And with this understanding, he fully accepted the calling to be the person he was always destined to be. Marcus' near-death experience changed his life in ways he never could have predicted. He returned to the world with a new clarity of purpose, a new determination to fight for justice and the rights of those who had no voice. He knew the journey would be long and full of challenges, but now he was prepared to face it with courage and conviction. Evelyn's memory, and the words she spoke to him, became a compass he used to navigate his daily life. Vanessa and the children also noticed the change in Marcus. He was more present, more involved, and more determined to make a difference in all areas of his life. He spent more time with his children, teaching them the lessons he had learned, and making sure they grew up knowing who they were and what they were capable of. He also worked more closely with Vanessa, discussing their plans and goals, and ensuring they were always aligned in their mission to create a strong, united family. At school, Marcus became an even more inspiring figure for his students. He began to incorporate the lessons he had learned into his classes, encouraging his students to question, challenge, and fight for a more just world. He taught them not to be afraid of their voices, to understand the power they had, and to use that power for good. His students, in turn, responded enthusiastically, many of them beginning to become more involved in social causes and fighting for change in their own communities. In the community, Marcus continued to be a leader, but now with a new vision. He began organizing more events, involving more people, and working more collaboratively with other community leaders. He knew that the fight for justice was not something he could do alone, and he began building coalitions and partnerships to amplify his impact. With each victory, no matter how small, he remembered Evelyn's words and felt like he was honoring her legacy. Over time, Marcus began to realize that real change was something that happened little by little, through small acts of courage and determination. He was no longer just focused on grand gestures, but also on the small, everyday actions that together made a significant difference. He knew his mission was ongoing, that the fight for justice never ended, but he was ready for this journey. He had found his purpose, and he was determined to live by it every day. The near-death experience was a turning point in Marcus' life, but it was what he did afterward, the way he chose to live his life, that truly defined his legacy. He not only survived the experience, but used it as a platform to become an even stronger, braver, and more dedicated person. And with this new strength, he continued to fight, to inspire, and to make a difference, knowing that every step of the way, Evelyn was with him, guiding him on his journey.